Hello, everyone. How are you doing? It is Thursday, I believe is how they say that. How are you? Trust everything is going good. And hey, spring, it's official, right? We have made it into uh, that part of the year up here in the Northern Hemisphere. You folks down in the Southern Hemisphere, well, hey, I'm sure you're glad summer's over with. Been a little hot down there. So good to see everyone. Was just singing a little, feeling groovy, and I am definitely feeling groovy. Uh, you know, I, it's part of the process. I was thinking today, we're all aging. It's a fact. If you're listening to me, then sweetheart, suck it up, cupcake, because we're all getting older. Uh, but the thing about it is, the spirit never ages. And whatever age you see yourself as, that's exactly how it's going to be. Something to think about. There are some who pass on well into their 90s who are, for all intents and purposes, still 20 somethings. So, hey, just invoking great favor upon us all. May there be full restoration. And the more we get into these subjects, restoration becomes so important. And may there be nothing missing, nothing broken in your life. And restoration is as well. Anyone that's done you harm. Now, you have to understand how the scale works here. We had Caroline on yesterday, and the dream catchers that she had, one of them was just speaking, the one particularly she made with the feather in the center, and I think that's how I approach life now. If you approach life that you want to make sure that your actions, cause and effect, have virtually no variance on the balance of a feather. Actually, I pick up a lot of that from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So I'll give credit where credit is due. All thoughts are not original, merely the regression or progression of an idea. So there we go. So good to see everyone. Hi, Sherry. How are you doing? Good to see you. Lois, Warrior Queen. Good to see you. Caroline, good to see you. Pamela Jean, how you doing? Awakened Bean, how are you doing, Borg? Good to see you. Robert, hello. Litty, hello. Gilbert, Linda, boy, and the list keeps Tim. There's just so many of you guys in here, and I thought I had turned this down, but I just heard something, and I am a stickler for that. So anyway, I digress. Hey, we got a full hour, and I don't want to waste any of your valuable time. I know you can go wherever you want, and it's an honor to have you here. We're a community, and it wasn't planned that way. It just happened. And I think sometimes, I know those things that happen where they're allowed to happen, in many cases, are the right way to go. So we're talking about today the code inside of you. I had a dream last night, and it was odd because I was walking on a staircase that kept going like this, much like a coil of a double helix. And I remember that as each step I was taking, there were two ends that were like this. And it was really odd as I was stepping. And so this morning, as I was doing my meditating, just seeing things, it's quite amazing what you and I possess. Every person, every body that's here, whether it's filled with the essence of good or whether it's filled with essence of nothing. I mean, who knows? Nothing is something. So I want to get into this real quick because this is a fascinating, if you meditate on this and really think about this, we still 10,000 years of writings. And even today, we're advancing at exponential rates. And the more we advance, the more we're set back because we really didn't know how much we didn't know. There's more information than can be stored on any computer, any type of hard drive in each of us. As we continue to break down the cells, the molecules, the proteins, the enzymes, everything else that is attached to our DNA, we're finding out that even on the cellular level, there are levels upon levels upon levels of new data. I read one article that, who was it? I think it was, I think it may have been Harvard, I believe. They have stated that it's a language, we've learned part of it, but we still have a long ways to go. I have a friend who is in the biotech industry, and she was telling me that where biotech is going, it used to be on a different path than much of big pharma, and then it all merged, and today it's a blending of technology, AI algorithms, chemical compounds, and discovering the chemical compounds inside you and I. And each time they do, they find out there is still more information than they, quite frankly, they don't know what to do with it. The studies that we're finding out in how the genetic code in all of us, it's breaking down. It's complex, it's vast, but there's so many even environmental elements today that are impacting us. You and I are being exposed to cosmic rays that, well, no other generation walking on this planet has that we know of. And if you just happen to be in the crosshairs where these elements come down and these rays hit your DNA, your double helix, that damage is, they say it cannot be fixed. It's permanently damaged, blown away. And the reason why we have birth defects, the reason why we have disease is because something has gone wrong with the code. We all carry it. And we have now found within the human genome, when we map that out, that this mitochondrial DNA is far more vast than the genome that we had discovered. And of course, the mitochondrial DNA is feminine in its natural state. And what we have found within the mitochondrial DNA is the RNA, how there is a transfer between the RNA and the DNA. And we're discovering now whole new sets of proteins, strands that the more we find out inside of them is yet more information. And what I'm trying to bring to point here is this: the complexity of the genetic code that you and I possess individually could be equated to knowledge of God itself. And hear me out on this. Before you just simply summarily just, say, well, that's ridiculous, think about this. If we are in fact eternal beings, which I believe we are, then that means we have no beginning, no end. But while we're in this plane of temporal existence in these biochemical bodies, where would you store that information? Obviously, I believe each and every one of us have the vast knowledge of the infinite being itself. Imagine if our brains had the ability, our consciousness had the ability to access this locked information. And look at what happens with particularly the mitochondrial. You see, it all happens with mom, the female. That's why this monotheistic patriarchal point of view of God is messed up. It's not true. It's a trap. It's a trap. Run, run. Because what we're finding out here, look at this, folks. All you lady that are out there, this is what you really are, the creator. You're the goddess. No male can do this. In fact, there would be no males unless the female decided. But look at what can happen. Because the code is now corrupted and collapsing, this is what happens, and this is where we get all of our diseases. And guys, particularly you younger fellas out there, talking to you 40s and under, y'all are screwed, man. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because your sperm count is so low and so weak. And look at what happens when you can get down to such weak spermatozoids. You can see what happens. It's quite fascinating. So I said all that, as he says, to get to a point that, give me 1 second here as he pulls this back up. There we go. Now I'm back in there. This is science. This is you and I. I was thinking today in deep thought. Oh, I was, in that place that most seek to go. Why wouldn't we have all the information ever needed? The body, no matter how you want to put it in its construction, it truly amplifies and epitomizes that the smallest rules the largest. And just a rearranging of any part of the complexity of those strands, a double helix DNA, the RNA that's within the mitochondrial DNA. I think it's a mystery. I don't know if man will ever figure it out. It's complex, and there has to be what I would consider a consciousness side of the equation. I mean, if not, then what you could truly say, we're just merely visitors in these avatars, having no control over the complexity of a code that is buried within these bodies. Now, is this code represented as well in consciousness? Is consciousness nothing more than a part of this code? And if so, does this lead us to where we invent gods? And we do. I keep telling you this. Many of you gotten it. No God has ever manifested before humanity. None ever will. And there's good reason for that. But that doesn't stop us from doing this to ourselves over and over again. I have something here I want to show you. Give me 1 second here as he pulls this up, because I know I have it. I think there it is. Okay. This is a great article. It's in technologynetworks.com. It's called Complex Society Give Birth to Big Gods. Folks, this is a fascinating article. It talks about an international research team, including members of the Complexity Society Hub in Vienna. They've investigated the roles of big gods in the rise of complex, large-scale societies. Big gods are defined as moralizing deities who punish ethical transgressions. Did you hear that? That's the only reason why there is a necessity for a god, because it's going to punish you. It's your only reason for compliance, because you're going to be punished. Now, contrary to prevailing theories, the team found that beliefs in big gods are consequences, not a cause, of the evolution of complex societies. The results are published in the current issue of the Journal of Nature. For the statistical analysis, the research used the Shalett Global History Databank, the most comprehensive and constantly growing collection of historical and prehistorical data. Currently, SEHAT contains about 300,000 records on society's complexity, religion, and other characteristics of 500 past societies spanning 10,000 years of human history. Now get this, folks. It has been a debate for centuries why humans, unlike other animals, cooperate in large groups of genetically unrelated individuals, says SEHAT director and co-author Peter Turchin from the University of Connecticut and the Complexity Service Hub in Vienna. Factors such as agriculture, warfare, or religion have been proposed as main driving forces. One prominent theory is the big or moralizing God hypothesis is this, assumes that religious beliefs were key. According to this theory, people are more likely to cooperate fairly if they believe in gods who will punish them if they don't. To our surprise, our data strongly contradicts this hypothesis, says lead author Harvey Whitehouse. In almost every world religion for which we have data, moralizing gods tended to follow, not precede, increases in society complexity. Even more so, standardized rituals tended, on average, to appear hundreds of years before gods who cared about human morality. This is why we're here, to break out of this construct. The article didn't say there wasn't an infinite being, a creator. It's just there are. Listen, if one religion is right, then all the rest are wrong. That's crazy. Now, this is a livescience.com, and it has, when ancient societies hit 1 million people, vengeful gods appear. For we know him who said, and I will execute great vengeance upon them with furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord, when I shall lay my vengeance upon them. You know what I can tell that God? Bring it on. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's a personal opinion by the presenter, and if I offended anyone, too bad. Suck it up. The God depicted in the Old Testament may sometimes seem wrathful, sometimes, and in that, he's not alone. Supernatural forces that punish evil play a center role in many modern religions. But which came first, complex societies or the belief in a punishing God? You can't show me any God on the planet that is an all-loving God, that doesn't have wrath, retribution, hell, et cetera, attached to it. I think, as Shakespeare once said, I thinketh those protestest too much. A new study suggests the formation of complex societies came first, and that the belief in such gods helped unite people under a common higher power. It's all about control. That's all it is. It's about control. Think about it. What would be the volition of any individual to want to worship something unless they were afraid to be punished? I mean, it gets really complex. But this is what we find today. I'm half thinking of getting in touch with some very wealthy people I know and talk about building a place where we could bring in other people that could be free of this punishment and reward. That's screwed up, folks. That's the ultimate of duality. You realize that, right? And it's so ingrained into us. It's how most of, I mean, I was raised where I was literally almost broken by beatings. You know, why? Well, because in the Christian religion, you know, they'll always bring out that verse, you know, spare the rod and, you know, spoil the child. You got to drive the wickedness out of the child, you know, with the whip. You know, that's crazy. But you can take it to the other extreme where, you know, you play that, well, actions have no consequences. Oh, I'm sorry. And we go on. Doesn't work that way. That's a good point, Joe. By the way, Joe, YouTube didn't like our program. They put some restrictions on that. Could you imagine the Sapien Manifesto? But that's the reality we live in, folks. And it impacts all of us. You, me, anyone who says that it doesn't, I would question the veracity of your statement, sir or madam. Because the way that this matrix is interwoven, it is punishment, reward, control, punishment, comply, punishment, consent, punishment, obey, punishment, all the way to God. Christian God, Jewish God, Muslim God, the Hindu God. I mean, all the gods. I mean, I read recently, are you ready for this? We have now, our species, we have over 300,000 religions. Now, you divide that up against 7.5 billion people, those pretty large followings. Cool, Joe, thanks. Think about it. When are we going to stop inventing gods? Now, I have another presentation I wish to show you. I think you're going to like this one. So I wanted you to think about something. You, if you're hearing my voice, seeing my image, I'm talking to you individually. What's your definition? Don't look at everyone else, but ask yourself right now, how do you define the universe and your life? I bet you probably don't look at it as a computer simulation, but by the end of this presentation, you're going to see that it is exactly that. And that code that may be inside of us may be the blending, the melding of a spiritual being to a temporal biochemical essence. Do you know that there's no actual pictures of the universe? All simulations. Now, this is really interesting. So let me get into this. This may strike you as very unlikely, but the Oxford professor Nick Bostrom has argued that we are more likely to be in a simulation than not. If such simulations are possible in theory, he reasons, then eventually humans will create them, presumably many of them. If this is so, in time, there will be many more simulated worlds than non-simulated ones. Statistically speaking, therefore, we are more likely to be living in a simulated world than a real one. Very clever. But is there any way to empirically test this hypothesis? Indeed, there is. There may be. In a recent paper, Constraints on the Universe in a Numerical Simulation, the physicists Denis Devoldy and Savage outlined a possible method for detecting that our world was actually a computer simulation. Physicists have been creating their own computer simulations of the forces of nature for years on a tiny scale, the size of an atomic nucleus. They use a three-dimensional grid to model a little chunk of the universe. Then they run the program to see what happens. This way, they have been able to simulate the motion and collisions of elementary particles. But these computer simulations, Professor Bean and his colleagues observed, generate slight but distinctive anomalies, certain kinds of asymmetries. Might we be able to detect these same distinct anomalies in the actual universe? They wondered. In their paper, they suggest that a closer look at cosmic rays, those high energy particles coming to Earth's atmosphere from outside the solar system, may reveal similar asymmetries. If so, this would indicate that we might, just might ourselves be in someone else's computer simulation. In Nick Bostrom's paper, he wrote, this paper argues that at least one of the following propositions is true. One, the human species is very likely to go extinct before reaching a post-human stage. Two, any post-human civilization is extremely unlikely to run a significant number of similarities of their evolutionary history or variations thereof. Unlikely. Three, we are all almost certainly living in a computer simulation. It follows that the belief that there is a significant chance that we will one day become post-humans who run ancestor simulations is false, unless we are currently living in a simulation. A number of other consequences of this result are as discussed. Get a chance, read the paper. Now, in a universe that's using a computer simulation, this is how they do it. They simulate the intelligent hypothesis. If you grow an evolving intelligence in a simulated environment, it should, given enough time, deduce, infer, or observe that its environment is a computer simulation. This leads to the Sims simulation. You cannot evolve an intelligent life form in a simulated environment and at the same time keep the simulated nature of that environment hidden indefinitely. This leads to eventually the savvy inevitability. Nearly all scientifically robust life forms eventually figure out their environments is a computer simulation. Reality has become science fiction. The purpose of this presentation is to explain that the reality most people agree upon to live in isn't the entire picture of what's going on. Right in front of our eyes exists a more grand, splendid, incredible world that most of us choose not to observe. I ask you, is reality nothing more than what we can perceive with our five physical senses? Sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. You know, 2 are chemical, 3 are electrical. Touch for the skin, pressure, temperature, the tongue, taste, speech, the eyes, light, ears, sound, nose, smell. This indicates that all consciousness might in fact be merely programmed by the very brain that we possess. Physical, chemical. Physical is touch, hearing, sight. Chemical, smell and taste. The same thing as the serpent. I digress. Heinz Pringle said, "A good simulation, be it a religious myth or scientific theory, gives us a sense of mastery over experience, to represent something symbolically, as we do when we speak or write, is somehow to capture it, thus making it one's own. But with this appropriation comes the realization that we have denied the immediacy of reality, and that in creating a substitute, we have but spurned another thread in the web of our grand illusion." So consciousness, this is the big debate. That's what we define. This says, that's why I exist. I can prove I exist because I have consciousness. Oh yeah? So what happens when you're sleeping? Do you cease to exist? So what is consciousness? The state of being awake and aware of one's surrounding. We've been talking about this a lot lately. The awareness or perception of something by a person, the fact of awareness by mind of itself and the world. The last is the one that validates all consciousness. I think, therefore I am, I think. Consciousness media is the content that uses alternative modes of thinking. Now, you see, today it is conscious media. The millennials are addicted to it, and now Generation Z coming up behind them are going to be fully integrated. And that's exactly what it is. It uses alternative modes of thinking, integrating spiritual, experimental, and contemplative ideas with methodologies drawn from modern science to explore and understand the human condition and ways in which individuals can align their spiritual, emotional, and physical beings to live in harmony with themselves, others, and the planet. They're a little bit ahead of their time, huh? Media, not really, that merges scientific concepts with spiritual concepts and Eastern thought with Western thought. Each tradition reinforces the other. Folks, all this is Hellenism in a modern day term. It also inspires or creates an awakening. It expands the spectrum of choices and possible answers to our most pressing concerns. So this is what we're involved in now. I would call it probably much more of awareness than awakening. Maybe it is an awakening, becoming aware, but this is how the mind, the consciousness is heading towards. And when you think of the theory of the mind by Dr. Kappas, he contends that the conscious mind only occupies 12% of all thought. And that is used for analysis, thinking, plans, short-term memory. Now, the critical mind is made up primarily of the subconscious mind. Dr. Kappas theorizes 88%. And in that 88% of the subconscious mind is what's most cherished by consciousness beings. The conscious mind is ever evolving. The subconscious really becomes who you are. Number one, long-term memory. That's the hell that we witness so often today with degenerative brain disease, Alzheimer's, dementia. When you lose your long-term memories, it's over, baby. You may be in there, but you're lost. 2, emotions and feelings. Because emotions and feelings is what makes the long-term memories live. Habits, relationship patterns, addictions. 4, involuntary body functions, and I contend that that is completely separate. I believe that's a completely separate entity that lives within us. We co-occupy space. 6, developmental stages. 7, spiritual connection. 8, intuition. Fascinating, isn't it? So when you look at this from left to right, this is in the increasing degree of consciousness and attention disassociation called CAD, from identity to full dissociation. Because consciousness evolves. We still don't know how to define consciousness. And so the best that we can do is by the observation of the observer, you and I. Think about it. So you have identity. All right. This is called consciousness and attention. Consciousness is identical with attention. We see this in babies. That's how we learn. Then as you go and progress, you get type A. This is attention is necessary for consciousness, and there is only one type of consciousness, attention. You move on. Attention is not necessary for consciousness, and there is only one type of consciousness, attention. We progress to type C. Attention is not necessary for consciousness, and there are many types of consciousness, attention. And finally, we get to the pinnacle, all forms of consciousness, all forms of attention. This is where I think that many who ascend, the yogis, the ones who go off on the spiritual quest, attention and consciousness are completely disassociated, and there is no conscious attention. Deep, I know. And when you begin to think about, instead of looking up into the sky, you're actually gazing down into the infinite cosmic abyss with only gravity holding you to the surface of the earth. No matter what your position is on earth, whether you think you're north or whether you think you're south, space has no direction in its essence. We define it with direction because it gives us order. So Elon Musk has been said, chances are we're all living in a simulation. In the simulation theory, a theory exists where the entirety of our reality is a synthesis of a greater world. It has found popularity among the general public and great minds alike. Nick Bostrom's reread that's theory was thrust into the spotlight after Elon Musk stated, chances are we're all living in simulation. The idea helped people captivate the fact that men such as Musk brought into the theory seemed encouraging to many. So you have this view of nature, human nature. And this is by the person's perceptions, which are based on his or her views of reality, phenomenology. Adler believed that we construct our reality according to our own way of looking at the world. I am convinced that a person's behavior springs from this idea because our senses do not see the world we apprehend it. Alder, 1933 to 1964. So phenomenology, as you can see, has some foundations. Now, there are different types of theories. There's the developmental theory. Developmental theories provide a set of guiding principles and concepts that describes and explain human development. Some developmental theories focus on the formation of a specific quality, such as the Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Other developmental theories focus on growth that happens throughout the lifespan, such as Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Then you have the grand theories. Grand theories are those comprehensive ideas often proposed by major thinkers such as Sigmund Freud, Erik Erikson, and Jean Piaget. So what's the difference? So why does consciousness seem so much harder to get a handle on than gravity and energy? Gravity and energy are understood in physics terminology. It seems that the same cannot be said of consciousness. So why does consciousness seem so much harder to get a handle on than gravity and energy? It's because it's ever evolving. It's like liquid metal. And as we continue to evolve, there will be continued new theories. Searle said in 92 that aspects of consciousness were defined by subjectivity, unity, intentionality, mood, gestalt structure, attention, boundary conditions, familiarity, overflow, pleasure, unpleasure, risk, reward, punishment, pleasure. Riker and Lakoff, they said, well, it's awareness, attention, quanella, unity, memory, first person's perspective, self-awareness, conceptual framing and metaphors, and empathy. Most people can't do these exercises. And when you really get down to it, consciousness could be defined, and this all has to do with the DNA code inside of us, folks. There's a lot going on here because it seems that this DNA code is the one that's driving consciousness. So we have different states of consciousness: alert, daydreaming, drowsiness, sleep. We seem to follow the same thing. The brain and consciousness. Consciousness, the process underlying the mental model we create of the world of which we are aware. It is also part of the mind from which we can potentially retrieve a fact, an idea, an emotion, a memory, and combine it with critical thinking. Can you make an argument that you are who you or what you are, and your consciousness allows it? Prove yourself. You can write, you can talk, but prove yourself. So for Iron Wang, they came up with another theory in critical consciousness. What they said, we really advance in three stages, from the magical to the naive to awareness. The magical is acceptance, status quo, and live a life of ignorance, attitudes of helplessness. Wow. If you're naive, social simulation is sound but corrupt, not willing to accept their circumstances, but rather blame it on others. Then you get to the awareness stage of critical consciousness, and this is the stage where aware of their own responsibility for choices that either maintain or change the reality with which they live. Virtually all New Age metaphysics is based upon these three triads. Learning to perceive social, political, and economic contradictions and to take action against the oppressive elements of reality is indeed critical consciousness. If magic is the creation of subjective realities in the minds of other people, then we moderns have learned how to perform magical incantations on a vast industrial scale. David Brin. Spelling, grammar, cursive, all the things we live in today. Alan Watts wrote, "We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time, in which the so-called present moment is felt as nothing but an infinitesimal hairline between an all-powerful, causative past and an absorbingly important future. We have no present. Our consciousness is almost completely preoccupied with memory and expectation. We do not realize that there never was, is, nor will be any other experience than present experience." We are therefore out of touch with reality. We confuse the world as talked about, described, and measured with the world which actually is. We are sick with a fascination for the useful tools of names and numbers, of symbols, signs, conceptions, and ideas. Alan Watts. Real freedom is the consent not to exist. When you awaken the matrix and realize that you are trapped inside the greatest of technology, that God is already and has always been artificial intelligence, and that you are programmed with a code. Yeah. You are trapped for all eternity in a simulation? Is your soul a synthetic creation of the programmers? Are we living in a simulated reality? If so, there may be no escape from hell and no afterlife as we imagine. This is the downside to this. You see, the external world is made up of what we call the mental apparatus. It's made of consciousness, preconscious, and unconscious. Consciousness is the content of this system that are conscious. Preconscious contents of this system are unconscious, but can be recalled if required. Unconscious contents of this system are unconscious and cannot normally be recalled. So the question is God really divine? What if this is a virtual reality of a hell simulation? What if God is artificial intelligence and war and disease and suffering are programmed codes? Even our DNA, folks, has been altered. What is the realm of death? Is that another simulation? Is it merely one simulation after the other? The simulation hypothesis. How do you determine reality? Evidence shows that the universe is nothing but a circuit board. The question is, are you real? Who is your avatar? You know, when you do the mirror awareness experiment and you start doing mirror gazing, this becomes much more, how shall we say, solid. Can the physical be transformed? It can. We're learning. David Icke happened to say this, and I loved what it said. They said I was mad when I said we lived in a simulated illusion, as they did when exposing Ted Heath. Now, mainstream physicists say the same, and isn't that the case? You know, here's the deal, folks. In the future, humans will be able to simulate entire universes quite easily. And given the vastness of time ahead, the number of these simulations are likely to be huge. So if you ask the question, do we live in the one true reality or in one of the many simulations? The answer, statistically speaking, is that we're more likely living in a simulation. Now, the computer simulation in artificial intelligence has basically several different basic concepts. AI, artificial intelligence, is the field where scientists try to derive computer systems that could accomplish the same thing as humans. We've already done it. We've already run the computer simulations, attempt to mimic functions of the human, including errors and biases. Reasons for making computers smarter: the computer might do marvelous things for humans. And then again, they may entrap us. When you study this and you begin to look at the arguments, digital machines can nevertheless simulate thought processes and other forms of human behavior. The premise: computer programs and those who design the systems that they control can increase their performance capabilities, making them better simulations. Their performance capabilities may be closer and closer approximations to the performance capability of human beings without turning them on into thinking things. That's the point. Without turning them into thinking beings. And guess what? They said things, but it's beings now. We know it. The proverbial genie is out of the bottle, folks. And when you look at the mathematic equation of what consciousness can actually be said. Fraction of all human level technological civilizations that survive to reach a post-human stage. That's the key. Can we do it? The math says no. And as we continue to look at this, the bottom line of it is this genetic code within us that we come to define consciousness, which all of us try to struggle with. And when you finally get down to it, consciousness is the awareness of environmental and cognitive events, such as the sights and sounds of the world, as well as one's memories, thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. And I guess that would go if one of those senses don't operate. Now, here's the problem. In consciousness, we have dualism, materialism, mentalism, physicalism. Maybe we have new ones, new isms coming. But the dualism is the one that predominantly holds the head seat over all the rest. We're taught from birth that dualism is the reality of this realm. We make our gods to be dualism. They're dualistic in their personifications. And behind that materialism, we have seen the effects of that. Mentalism is the one that we tried to believe that consciousness soul was the basis for all reality. Physicalism, the idea that all consciousness experience can be explained by neurons or physiologically by observable stimuli and responses. I fail to accept any of these. I think the state of consciousness goes deeper. I say we're still defining it. So, as you can see, it's complex, folks, and I didn't even get through half of that presentation. For those of you who stayed on this, I like that, we're learning. And it's the thing that I'll continue to carry on, even on the other side. But while I'm here, it is a journey that, some people work all their lives to become rich. Most don't. Most pursue the imagination of materialism brings happiness. They fail. Many through stimuli, they fail. Many through religion, they fail. I think it's when you really get down to that one key point about consciousness, and that to me is self-responsibility. And in that, you don't get into this dualism of right, wrong, good, evil. Thank you, Caroline. But I think that this is the struggle. We're going to get into the alien interview tomorrow. Didn't have time for today. We have a great letter from Source. I think as I continue to look at it, folks, I think we can plug into this, call it the giant tuning fork in the sky. I don't know. But the more I begin to think about it, I can see now how you can begin to become disciplined enough in the mind to levitate. I mean, you can call it magic or whatever, but I don't know if that's the right term. Maybe. But one thing's for sure, the genetic code inside of us. Can we ever get to that point to unlock it? When you really think about it, and it controls all thoughts down to the neuron, still fascinates me how a neuron can generate an electric magnetic field. And as it sends forth that spark from it, that light, literally, to do another neuron receptor that's designed specifically for it, you begin to understand If it's a magnetic field, then magnetic fields can be interrupted. Magnetic fields can be manipulated. And is it possibly, if ETs really do alien abductions, which I believe there's enough evidence that shows that something's going on, someone's being taken, there's only so much physiology that you could do on a human body. We know how the body works, I mean, at least physiologically. Could it be that there are alien races that are looking for this same genetic bonanza, this code? Is it something that maybe only humans possess? Was it by some design of some superior beings of some kind as they were traveling through the realities of universes that they saw us, had favor upon us? Is it true that we may have been seeded by the star people? I don't know. A lot of questions here, but I intend to start asking more questions about, let's talk about the genetic code. How can we unlock it? There's so many of you that I know just suffering, terrible diseases, ailments. If we have this code within us and we know that chromosomal damage, what it can result in, my hope is that as we get into the Human Genome 2 project, eventually we'll figure out how to do this. But even if we do, I have a sense that the Archons will steal it and extract even more money from us. It's what they do now. Maybe we were created order at the back of the comic book. I love that cheesesteak. But this is what goes with thought, and that's why I think channeling should be done more. I mean, it could be that maybe it's the one thing that's held our species back. Maybe in fact, we're programmed to channel. Maybe there is vast amounts of information ready to be downloaded by individuals who can then begin to spread it amongst the other races. I mean, that's how every holy book was written. Someone said, no, it was written by the inspired word of God. Well, all right, so the dude making it up? So if it's not done by channeling, then it's nothing more than a fanciful, imaginative story. I have respect for the writings. People believe in them. Do I believe that there is a God associated with that? No, but I believe that there are powerful beings from which that came from. I mean, we can't think that we're the only ones here, folks. We can't be the top of the food chain. If it is, we're screwed. And I refuse to believe that. I just believe that there are higher states of consciousness, higher states of sentient intelligence that are beyond the physical body, that can coexist in an interdimensional reality and dimension of both spirit, the ethereal, and the physical. And I'm going to stick by that. Oh, well, folks, thank you all. This has been fun. I appreciate that. Yeah, I seen that, Brad. I've seen John's, what his thoughts are. And, I happen to think that it's like walking through a field of wildflowers. If you collect the vast variety, you have a beautiful bouquet. So that's how I choose to look at it. Folks, I just thank you. Just again, invoking great favor. I'll be on the Artist First Network tonight on the Steiger Perspective. I'm going to be talking about this consciousness. We're going to get into, I think there is an awareness, a shaking out taking place. And I think our numbers are getting stronger. Vast amounts of people are leaving organized religion. And I think we offer a safe haven. I think we offer a sanctuary that, it takes a long time sometimes to get that crap out of your head. let me tell you, I'm finding all the time I have to dig out the weeds. I mean, pervasive indoctrination goes deep. Know what I mean? All right, folks, much love to you. Thank you for tuning in and sharing this hour with me. I appreciate it. You all folks are best. I mean, thank you, kitten. Appreciate that. It's deep, isn't it? I mean, when I look in the mirror now and I start gazing inside, wow, folks, I'll just close with this. I believe that there are far more who are for us than against us. And I mean that spiritually. I mean those that already exist in that realm. And I think that because we have so regressed in our view of the spiritual realm, allowing the certain doctrines to permeate our thinking, that when we step outside of that and realize that one day we're going to be back and joined with them, and we may discover how many of us want to help. I think this is the time now to begin to explore this. Is there negative aspects? Sure there are. But I also believe in sovereignty. So let's practice this. Talk with the planets. Talk with the others. Talk with the dragons. That's what I say. If they exist, then they're of a higher intelligence of some way or another. And I'm always willing to be in the classroom. All right, folks, thank you. You're the best. Much love to you. Namaste to all of you. See you tonight, or we'll see you tomorrow. All right, be good to yourself, because in the end, you're the only one that can. All right, bye-bye. Hey, wasn't this a quest for the unknown? I think we got it. All right, folks, bye-bye.